Just minutes in, the panel, here to listen to public concerns, here's one it hasn't heard before.
I am disappointed that you chose to separate the audience from the presenters.
Currently, the U.S. imports about 800,000 barrels of tar sand oil from Canada every single day. And this expansion of the pipeline would drastically up that amount.
It will be the same for the oil sands. They will be outdated, just like unmarried single women.
And welcome back as we continue to take a look at what's changing around the world with Radio Free Canada. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nispers.
You know what? We're talking about idle no more and the way that this country is getting sold out from underneath our feet. And there it is, Stephen Harper, once again.
What, the chief executive officer of a transnational corporation known as Canada?
Yeah.
I think he's a bit of a fascist.
Yes. The technical definition of fascism is when you put corporations in front of people's rights.
Yeah.
And that's what fascism is. By the way, my parents went overseas to shoot people like that.
Yeah, well, they say that Germany lost, but fascism won the Second World War.
Well, they're proving it right now. The conservative government is losing credibility right across the board, okay, because it's not listening to dialogue on people. They only got 26% of the vote. They're acting as if, well, their statement, conservative priorities are Canadian priorities.
That's right. And
conservative
they must set
values.
the economy ahead of everything else, including the people, the environment, human rights,
yes,
who they deal with overseas.
But they don't discuss how the economy works. They don't discuss the fact that banks make money up out of nowhere.
Shh, you can't talk about that.
I can't talk about that. But let's talk about Enbridge and run one of my favorite commercials to start things off. Thanks for tuning in.
I love the logo. I love the swooshing in sound, the logo. This tells them that we're a serious company. This is production value.
It's a path to prosperity. A path to thousands of jobs. A path.
Is that supposed to happen? I don't think that's supposed to. That's okay. We'll clean this up. We'll be as good as new. There we go. Okay.
A path to thriving communities. A path to world-class safety standards and low environmental...
I'm sorry. My fault. I hit the wrong switch. I thought I was turning up the heat. I'm sorry.
Low environmental impact. A path that will increase trade, build global alliances, and strengthen Canada's...
Does the pipe have a turn-off thing? Find the turn-off thing. We'll hit it with a hammer. Never mind. We'll go straight to the families. This is the strongest part anyway. This will sell it.
The Northern Gateway Pipeline. It's more than a pipeline. It's a path to our future.
You know, I don't think the animation is really up to our standards anyway, okay? Are the HST stick figures, are they still working? Somebody get in touch with them. We'll call it a wrap for now. Get in touch with them. We'll carry on tomorrow. Anybody into dinner? How about some Chinese? They could do that thing with the duck and the oil.
That is one of my favorite ones.
Well, you know, they're trying desperately to appear as green as possible.
And you know what? We've got them. Okay, you got Enbridge and Monsanto. They've got public relations teams, and they do stuff.
Yes, but at least Enbridge isn't known as the most evil corporation on earth, like Monsanto is. But Enbridge is getting up there. Now, recently they held hearings in Victoria about the Enbridge pipeline.
Okay.
But they didn't really allow the public in to hear them or have their words heard.
Oh, so there was a public hearing that
wasn't really public, yeah.
Oh, well, tell me more. I mean, are you saying that the mechanisms of democracy as presented to us aren't working? I mean,
what, you thought they were?
You're not telling me the system doesn't work, are you?
Well, no, I'm not telling you that, but I'll let the good folks at CTV Island News tell you that.
Okay, you make up your own mind. Remember, you've got more brain cells than we do. Use your intellect. Let's run this.
CTV News at 6 with Hudson Mack.
Good evening. Hudson Mack is off tonight. A public hearing on the Northern Gateway Pipeline project opened in Victoria today, but it didn't quite live up to its name. The public wasn't allowed in. Only people who had pre-registered to speak to the joint review panel were ushered into the Delta Ocean Point Resort. Everyone else was redirected to a hotel across town to watch the hearings via closed-circuit television. As CTV's Joe Perkins shows us, that group even included Victoria's new Member of Parliament.
Just minutes in, the panel, here to listen to public concerns, here's one it hasn't heard before.
I am disappointed that you chose to separate the audience from the presenters.
Across town, a room sits empty. For the first time since the hearings began, the public is banned.
So they didn't want any disruptions in the hearing room. Their main goal was to be able to hear from those registered speakers.
In what the panel calls an attempt to stay transparent, a viewing center is opened at another hotel. Sitting outside of it this morning, one frustrated Victoria MP.
This is a public hearing that is really not open to the public.
Murray Rankin tried to attend the hearing, but the newly elected politician wasn't registered.
He's now also threatened.
So, from a room at the Ramada, he joins his constituents and watches from the outside.
I urge this panel to not recommend approval to the project.
One by one, it's a steady flow of opposition.
I don't want to have to tell my kids, I'm sure you don't either, some years down the road, that, hey, how come there aren't as many seals or otters left?
Of the 280 registered speakers, 10 were scheduled to speak this morning. Not one supports the pipeline. Outside the hearing, people as frustrated as they are opposed.
Yeah, there's a little bit of frustration. It's unfortunate they're named public hearings and we're forced outside.
But from the outside, they appear to make the most of it, calling on the unlikeliest of speakers.
We may be small, but we have big hearts and we can change the future of Canada.
And like rallies in the past, there were surprises.
We have one of Enbridge's finest oil executives.
Cold and locked out, opponents quickly dumped the Enbridge actor.
Come on, best shot.
Back inside, Enbridge maintains it's in Victoria to listen to the people, not shut them out.
Well, we don't have a position on the decision. I mean, this is a decision from the Joint Review Panel that we abide by.
Enbridge says it plans to join the panel and listen to each of the speakers, a group of people that, for today, kept their message consistent.
People are worried about this project.
A concern heard today, both inside and out. Joe Perkins, CTV News, Victoria.
So, the public hearing that the public's not allowed to.
Exactly, unless you're pre-registered.
Of course. An MP is refused admittance.
Yes, doesn't look like transparency to me.
But it looks like a Harper move if I've ever seen one.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that guy, he behaves in the same mode altogether. If he can't control it, it's not part of his agenda.
Well, his main agenda seems to be pushing the tar sands to gain that diluted bitumen out to foreign markets.
And making sure that we don't build any refineries to provide ourselves with jobs, don't reserve any oil, and certainly don't ensure any prosperity for the future.
Canada doesn't even have any strategic oil reserves.
Yes, none. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows the fact that we have, 1/4 of the world's oil, but we have no oil reserves for ourselves.
No, so if our supply of imported oil is cut off, then we're kind of dead in the water.
I don't think it's 1/4 of the world, but we've got a big chunk of it. You want to run this?
What the?
Yeah, let's run it. Okay, let's run it.
Are your natural resources not attracting the attention they once did? Are your gushing wells at risk of going undrilled? If you think time is running out, you're probably right.
It's the same situation as the leftover single women. It will be the same for the oil sands. They will be outdated, just like unmarried single women.
Don't let them say that about you. Call now if your natural resources are exhibiting the following symptoms:
Shrewishness, old maidery, spinsterism, fallow pipeline tubes.
Asian businessmen are standing by to take your call and fulfill your wildest economic fantasies. Dial 1-866-770-6896.
Because unextracted oil sands are like women without children. Inert, unprofitable, devoid of purpose.
You can't be too picky, Canada. There are always younger, more exotic nations where they can get what they need. That number again is 1-866-770-6896. Because there's just no profit in collecting cats.
Yes, making sure that economy moves.
That's right.
I'm sorry, man.
That almost made me feel kind of dirty.
I know. It's dial 1-800
But
whatever.
speaking of dirty and dirty oil, there's another pipeline that they're talking about, or they're not talking about in the mainstream media, and that's the Keystone XL pipeline.
Okay, let's check it out. You make up your own mind.
You may have heard of the Keystone pipeline and its controversial XL expansion. Currently, the U.S. imports about 800,000 barrels of tar sand oil from Canada every single day. And this expansion of the pipeline would drastically up that amount. The project runs through 6 U.S. states: Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, and has caused quite a stir from environmental groups. Most recently adding fuel to the growing Idle No More movement, which supports the rights of indigenous people who believe this pipeline is a threat to their national sovereignty and to the land itself. Sadly, it seems that thousands of protesters against the project, both in Canada and the U.S., have been totally ignored. President Obama already announced his support for the southern leg of Keystone XL back in March.
My administration has approved dozens of new oil and gas pipelines over the last 3 years, including one from Canada. And as long as I'm president, we're going to keep on encouraging oil development and infrastructure, and we're going to do it in a way that protects the health and safety of the American people. We don't have to choose between one or the other. We can do both.
Right. Safety and oil. I've heard that one before. But let's look beyond these points for just a second and examine cui bono. Who is it that stands to benefit the most? First of all, if you think it's the American people, you're sadly mistaken. It's TransCanada. Unsurprisingly, the expansion of the pipeline will be a big win for Charles and David Koch of Koch Industries, a corporation that lobbies millions of dollars in this government every year. That's right, the Koch brothers and their gigantic oil conglomerate, which posts annual revenues of around $100 billion and already handles close to 25% of oil sand imports from Canada, have conveniently positioned themselves to benefit significantly from the expansion. So, is it like the Koch brothers claim that this project's a question of national security to help the U.S. wean off its Middle Eastern oil independence, or dependence rather? Well, one person that could answer that would be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice. Damn, too bad she herself also has a hefty stake in the project. Yep, Ambassador Rice, whose net worth is somewhere between $43 million, just so happens to have millions worth of investments in several Canadian utility companies, including none other than TransCanada Corporation, the corporation responsible for the pipeline. I think it's pretty clear what the motives are behind this operation. It's another case of exploiting and degrading the environment so massive corporations and wealthy politicians can profit. Like every policy, the average citizen stands to lose the most. And of course, no one else is left to speak for Mother Nature.
That is so awesome. Actually showing where Condoleezza Rice is.
Not Condoleezza, Susan Rice.
I'm sorry, Susan Rice. I just look at American.
One Rice is another Rice. Yeah, I know.
I mean, there isn't that much difference between them. But that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's the U.S. Leadership anyway. They're all tied in with all these big corporations anyway.
Yeah. And remember the scam, though, okay? And you just got to take a look at it. In Canada, sure, your MP has to disclose how much investments and where they are, but their spouse doesn't.
Yeah, I know. That's like the whole Homeland Security thing where Chernoff was pushing for the body scanners while his wife owned the company that built them.
Yeah, and like Harper, right? You know, one of his chief advisors. Okay, the guy who had a hooker or a call girl for a wife.
Yeah.
Hey, right. Make sure you do your own research on that one because it's one of those things that makes us grin and smile. Okay, what are we doing? What's the next clip?
We're going to take a swing down to south of the border, South America to be exact, to talk about what's going on in Venezuela.
You mean there's people living in South America? I watch CBC. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, well, we're not CBC.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
This is Radio Free Canada. South America, Asia, and all that coming up.